Hi, I'm Gail Sokol, and on today's show, we're opening the cookie jar again, part 2 of our 6-part series.
Welcome to Baking Radio. Learn the art and science of baking with author, educator, and award-winning chef, Gail Sokol. Whether you've been baking your whole life or you're brand new to the world of baking and you're looking to build your confidence and learn new skills in the kitchen, you're in the right place. This is Baking Radio.
On the last show, we listed the 8 basic categories of cookies. And if you remember, cookies are categorized based on how they're prepared and shaped for baking, and even how they're placed onto the sheet pan. And this will become much more clear as we go into each category. So let's review real fast. Don't worry, there's no test at the end. The 8 categories include drop cookies, refrigerator cookies, molded cookies, bar cookies, sheet cookies, rolled cookies, piped cookies, and the infamous wafer cookies. That's our 8 types of cookies, and we're going to explore each type within this series, and you're going to get some fabulous recipes too. So if you recall from my last show, I mentioned that each cookie recipe also follows a mixing method as well. And the mixing method will tell you the exact way the ingredients are to be combined and in what order. And yes, it does matter. Now, sometimes it doesn't really, like the one bowl method, it really doesn't matter if you have added your oil before your sugar. Oh my goodness. But sometimes it does matter. So listen up. Thankfully, there are only 3 mixing methods for cookies. They include that creaming method, which is also the same one we spoke about when we talked about high-fat cakes, right? With the softened butter and granulated sugar. Cookies sometimes have brown sugar in there as well. There's also the one bowl method, and that is when all the dry ingredients are combined with all the wet ingredients. Super simple. Sometimes known as the dumping method, but that's an ugly word, so we use the one bowl method. And then the egg foam method we talked about, where there is a meringue of some sort with egg whites, or even a whole egg that's beaten until air is sort of enveloped into it, or enveloped into it, however you want to pronounce it, with the beater attachment. So before we move on, there's one caveat, one tiny warning. Not all cookie recipes have a clear-cut method, and that's okay. Don't worry about it. There's no cookie police to worry or watch you. As I stated before, and in the previous show, there are so many different types of cookies. It's overwhelming. There's got to be hundreds of thousands of variations, and that's just for maybe chocolate chip cookies. So if you and I gathered all the recipes that we know of, let's say for peanut butter cookies or chocolate chip cookies, and we got people from all over the place to send us recipes, I guarantee we could probably fill a warehouse with them. And would they be similar? Would they be the same? Some of them might be, but some of them might have a few ingredients that differed. And it would make a very big difference in the final product. The cookie may be slightly chewier, it might be crisper, it might be fatter, it might be paler. All different ingredients will affect the final outcome. So I mention this to you just to give you some perspective of the enormity of recipes out there in the world. All right, you ready to get started? We're going to start with our first category of cookie, the drop cookie. So they're called this because you drop them onto a sheet pan, literally, either from a spoon. Sometimes I use a spoon and a rubber spatula to push it off the spoon. And sometimes I use an ice cream scooper to get a more consistent size. First of all, a drop cookie dough tends to be on the softer side. So you have to be able to drop it, meaning all the ingredients are mixed together. The dough is a little moister and tends to be on the stickier side. Think of a chocolate chip cookie dough. Drop cookies tend to be the most consistent in appearance when their doughs are dropped onto the sheet pan, like I said before, with an ice cream scooper. It's a little more uniform. And use the same size ice cream scooper. Sometimes you can get monster size ice cream scoopers when I want to make super big cookies. I use those. I have to admit, it's a guilty pleasure. I make massive, like cookies as big as your head. And you won't get as many cookies, but that's okay. They're just Just beautiful, beautiful things. Okay, we digress. You can also use a spoon, like a teaspoon, or you can use a tablespoon and a rubber spatula if you don't have different size ice cream scoopers. So don't worry about that. Who knew ice cream scoopers were not just for ice cream anymore, right? But it's a great way to make sure your cookies are the same shape. And if you don't have an ice cream scooper and you want to make sure that your cookies are super, super consistent, use that spoon. Make sure you're measuring exactly the same each time. Or sometimes I would even use a measuring cup, maybe a quarter of a cup measure. That's going to make a big cookie too. And then push it out, like, sort of drag it out with a rubber spatula. And then if you barely moisten your hands once it's on the sheet pan, you can slightly give each cookie a gentle squeeze to make each more uniform so they all look alike. Make sure, this is so important, please do this, space the cookie dough out about an inch or two between each cookie, because otherwise, what's going to happen. The cookie's going to spread, and if it spreads and it spreads into its neighbor, you're going to get Siamese twins, and that's not even the worst of it. The worst scenario I've ever seen. Okay, I'm going to tell you something. With a student of mine a few years back who was too lazy to use a second sheet pan, okay? Come on. What happened was he was dropping the dough onto the sheet pan so close together, and he thought they looked so beautifully, one blob after the other. And yes, they were pretty. Before baking, after baking, he made one gigundo cookie. That's it. They all bled into the other. They all just spread out into the other. So we had to cut them with a knife only while they're warm, because once they get cold, they will firm up and you'll have to break them. So worst things in the world can happen. Okay. But he was a little lazy for that. And I did chastise him about that. I really did. So what we're going to do is I'm going to give you a very quick recipe for what I call a chocolate sour cream drop cookie. And it uses the one bowl method. So remember that method within this category, the drop cookie within this method. And it's so easy and it's delicious. So this is a cakey cookie. I want you to get used to that. You want to get used to recognizing which mixing method you are using for cookies. If you bake often enough, you should be able to tell. Read through the recipe. See what type of fat is being used. See if you're melting the fat. See if you're creaming the softened fat with sugar. That's a dead giveaway creaming method right there. If you're melting the fat or using oil, a liquid fat, that's not the creaming method. It's probably the one bowl method. All right. You'll get the hang of it. Don't worry and don't give up. All right. So you ready? Sour cream, chocolate sour cream drop cookies, really. Okay. Here we go. This makes about 3 dozen cookies, and it's one of my favorites. First of all, preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit and get 2 sheet pans, line them with parchment paper, and set them aside. Now, what I like to do is, in a small bowl, whisk together all the dry ingredients. And that's 2 cups of all-purpose flour, a half a teaspoon of baking soda, half a teaspoon of salt. That's it. Those are your dry ingredients. Right? Very easy. The next thing you're going to do is get a small saucepan, and you're going to heat a half a cup of vegetable oil, and you're going to weigh out about 2 ounces of unsweetened chocolate. All right? 2 ounces of unsweetened chocolate, not bittersweet chocolate. If you use bittersweet or semi-sweet, it's not going to be that bad. It's just going to be a little too sweet, but I would use unsweetened. It really makes a difference. And just heat that up over low heat until the chocolate's melted and everything is smooth. And in a large bowl, so far you got your dry ingredients waiting for you. You've got your oil and chocolate melted. And in a large bowl, you're going to place 1 cup of dark brown sugar packed. If you don't have dark brown sugar, don't worry about it. Use light brown sugar. Nothing's going to happen. But dark brown sugar has more molasses in it, and it just has a richer flavor to me. I love it. So place 1 cup of brown sugar, make sure it's packed, and 1 large egg, and sort of whisk it together in this large bowl. Then you're going to add your melted chocolate and your oil mixture and blend it well. Then you're going to add a half a cup of sour cream. Now, if you don't have sour cream, wing it. You have plain yogurt. Plain Greek yogurt would be fabulous. Even if it's vanilla yogurt, perfect. Don't use any funky flavors like strawberry or anything, because then you'll add another flavor component that may not go very well. So half a cup of sour cream and a teaspoon of pure vanilla extract. Don't use the imitation. It will taste like cough syrup. Don't use that. And you're going to really stir everything together until the dry ingredients and everything is in there. Oh, I didn't tell you to put your dry ingredients in yet. Put them in now, okay, into the wet. So this is basically the one bowl method, but things are sort of melted on the side, and then the egg and the sugar are put together. It really is the one bowl method in a few different bowls. Now you're going to mix your batter together, and you're going to notice it's going to be beautifully dark brown, and it's going to be sort of thin. It's not going to be hugely thick, like something you could roll out into, like a rolled cookie. You're going to drop tablespoons of this batter onto your parchment-lined sheet pan, and you're going to leave a few inches in between. These cookies puff up, and you're going to bake them for approximately 11 minutes or until the cookies, just gently press them with your finger. They should be slightly firm to the touch. They'll firm up a little more as they come out of the oven, and take them out. Now, I don't usually put anything on top of these, but sometimes I do. I will melt a little chocolate and just drizzle it over the top. And if you want to mix in a little coffee to your chocolate, that would be good too. Or use white chocolate, or use a combo of dark and white chocolate, separately, mix them separately. So you have this like black and white thing going on. And sometimes I use them as the base for that black and white cookie. You know, the ones you get in New York City? They have they're like almost like moon cookies. They look like big round cookies, and they're very cakey, just like these. And there's a white frosting on one side and dark on the other. Well, all you have to do is take some confectioner's sugar. You don't even have to measure it. Just take a couple of cups, add a little water into the confectioner's sugar till it's a thick frosting, but it's also spreadable. Don't make it too thick, and don't make it too thin either. Take half out, add maybe a teaspoon or two of cocoa powder to one side, one bowl of it, and you'll have your chocolate frosting, and then you have your white frosting on the other, and just frost half and half if you want those black and white cookies. I use these all the time, but instead of a white cookie base, you have chocolate, and there's nothing wrong with chocolate. So there you have it, the chocolate sour cream drop cookie. So that is one of my favorite drop cookie recipes. So let's go on to our second category. This is the refrigerator cookie. And we talked about this in the previous show. Doughs for refrigerator cookies tend to be stiffer. They're not as sticky, so don't think drop cookie. And they're not as moist. Typically, the dough is similar to a softer clay-like consistency. And they can be shaped into logs, or even two different colored rectangles. And sometimes I've done that. And I'll put a little cocoa powder, or if you don't want chocolate, you can add a little food coloring to one half of the dough. So let's say green or red if you're doing something for Christmas, or blue and golden yellow for Hanukkah. You could do anything you want. Roll them out to rectangles, put one on top of the other, and then roll them into a tight log. So you create like a spiral. So you can do that with refrigerator cookies. And if you ever see a cookie recipe like that, that's a refrigerator cookie. So the log of dough, whether it's spiraled or not, is usually wrapped tightly in plastic wrap or parchment paper. And then it's refrigerated until the dough firms up. And you want to roll it on a flat work surface to make sure that you don't get like a flattened shape. You really want it round. And the name is refrigerator cookie because you're going to put it in the refrigerator to firm up, allowing that cookie dough to have a better structure after baking. And sometimes I freeze them. So I just wrap this dough. I don't want refrigerator cookies now. I want them later. So I'll just date them and label them, wrap them even tighter in plastic wrap, put them in my freezer. And then when the holidays come, or you're having company, or you want cookies for the sake of having cookies, take them out, thaw them in your fridge, make sure they're firm but not too hard, and then you just slice them on a cutting board using a sharp knife, and you want to cut them about 1/4 inch thick, and each slice is then placed onto the sheet pan, which is usually covered with parchment paper and baked. And you can keep them several months in the freezer, and you have just baked cookies like anytime you want, and no one would guess that they had been frozen. But the cookies are fabulous. And if the log is not too hard, or when you slice into it, if the log is too hard, let's say it's coming from the freezer and you haven't let it thawed, and you really push that knife through to make slices, it will crumble. So make sure it's neither too hard nor too soft when you're slicing it. Hard from the fridge is good, not hard from the freezer. I have to let mine sit out a little bit. Okay, so you might want to feel your dough to see when it's the proper, the proper consistency. So you'll notice most refrigerator type cookies don't have a lot of solids in them. Solids, and what do I mean by that? Chocolate chips, bits of cranberries or raisins or nuts. If they did, it would be very hard to cut them. These little bits would get in the way of the knife. Some refrigerator cookies do, but you really want to cut them super, super fine, almost mince them, whatever it is that you're going to put in them. And I'm going to give you a refrigerator cookie that's from my first book about professional baking, and it has ground up nuts in it. That's really, really delicious. So let me give you this recipe. And it's called a brown sugar pecan refrigerator cookie. And it's wonderful. It melts in your mouth. So the brown sugar pecan refrigerator cookie begins with preheating your oven to 375 degrees. And if you're going to make these ahead of time, remember, you don't have to preheat your oven because you're not going to be baking them off that day. So don't worry about it. So in the bowl of an electric mixer, and when it comes to cookies and it comes to the creaming method, you will use your paddle attachment. Don't use your whip attachment here. You want to cream 2 sticks or 1 cup of unsalted butter and make sure it's softened. So soften it either in your microwave. Don't melt it. Microwaves sometimes can be very powerful. So make sure it's room temperature. Leave it out for a couple hours. Or you can microwave it, but really watch. Only do it for a few seconds at a time. Don't just microwave it for 30 seconds. That will melt it. And it will not turn out to be the cookie you want. So in the bowl of this electric mixer, you're going to put 2 sticks of butter, or 1 cup, same idea. And then half a cup of light brown sugar. Make sure it's packed. And 3/4 cup of confectioner's sugar. That's powdered sugar. That's not granulated sugar. And you want to mix it until the mixture just begins to lighten in color. You don't want to beat the heck out of it. You want it just to be blended together so the butter and the sugar are sort of combined nicely. In another bowl, again, you're seeing a pattern here like we did in the drop cookie. We take all our dry ingredients and we're going to put them in a separate bowl. And that includes 2.5 cups plus 2 teaspoons of bread flour. Yeah, did she just say bread flour? I did. Bread flour. This is a higher protein content in it. This will give you a nice structure to your cookie. Trust me, it really makes a difference. It really makes it delicious. So 2.5 cups plus 2 teaspoons of bread flour. You're going to whisk that together with 2.5 cups plus 2.5 tablespoons of cake flour. That has a lower protein content. Okay? 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, and 1.5 cups of pecans that are finely ground. Now, I like to put these in the food processor and pulse them, but don't pulse them until they become like pecan butter. You want to pulse them just so they get finely, finely ground. So it's almost like a nut meal. And if you don't like pecans or you can't eat them or don't like them, use any other type of nut you want. Almonds, cashews, anything you want. Do not substitute almond butter or peanut butter because it's not the same thing. We're looking for the finely ground nuts. We're not looking for the oils to start getting really pulverized in here and making like a butter. That we do not want. So you have your dry ingredients, okay? Bread flour, cake flour, salt, baking soda, and nuts. Whisk those together and put them aside. Now into your electric mixing bowl where your butter and your sugars have been sort of hanging out, you're going to slowly add 2 large eggs. And what I like to do is crack my eggs in a cup or a liquid measuring cup. And you're going to add 1 egg at a time and put it on medium speed until each egg gets incorporated. Add them 1 at a time. And once you add them, add your vanilla and mix on low speed until everybody's blended together nicely. And then on low speed, just add your flour mixture to the wet ingredients until it's combined. It's going to form a dough. You're going to take that dough out and you're going to divide it in half and form each half into a 13-inch log, 13-inch long log. So that's over a foot long. You're going to wrap each log in plastic wrap and chill it for at least 3 hours or until it's firm. Now, if your fridge, doesn't chill very well or it chills it super fast, that's fine. But make sure it's firm. You don't want to slice them when they're soft. Then let's say you're ready to bake and you're ready to go. So you've preheated your oven to 375. Then you're going to slice each log crosswise into 1/4 inch thick slices. You're going to place them on a sheet pan. Remember, the sheet pan's been covered with parchment paper. And then I like to use a pastry brush and brush a little egg white on the top of each refrigerator cookie, on the top of each slice. And I place 1 pecan half on top of each cookie, pressing gently to adhere. Don't press down super, super hard. The egg white will be like your glue, okay? And hold that pecan right on top of the cookie. It makes the cookies look gorgeous when they come out of the oven. And you're going to bake the cookies only for about 9 to 12 minutes or until the bottoms and the edges are light brown. You want them to cool on that sheet pan for about 5 minutes and then remove them and place them on cooling racks or on plates. And they are so beautiful with that pecan half on the top. And when you crunch into them, they're delicious. They're absolutely delicious and very buttery. So that's basically the show for today. On our next show, we are going to continue with our hands in that cookie jar, part 3.